Ladies and gentlemen, here we are again for another episode of the Living on the Verge podcast. I'm Virginia. Thanks for joining me. I'm so glad to be back with you. We have a lot to cover as usual, so let's jump right on in. But before we do, I've been thinking what direction I should take the show in because there's so much content, especially this summer. We have a lot of new things coming out. There are things that I find myself watching that are not really in the Bravo universe that I still want to talk to you guys about. And, there's just a lot to cover. So for now, here's what I've come up with. Any shows that are airing on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday that I will cover them on Tuesday on this podcast. And hopefully I'll also be able to drop like a little beauty tip or a finance tip or a home tip in with that podcast. And then any shows that are aired on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I'll cover on my Friday podcast, along with pop culture, Bravo news, and then hopefully, like whenever necessary, a food and travel segment. And we'll also continue to have some guests on. I do have some scheduled. I'm not going to get started on those for a little while yet because I want to make sure that I bring you really good, solid interviews. So we're going to take our time and do that right. And then one last thing, you guys, I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to make it to World Dog Day and be able to report on that for you. But to be completely honest with you, something better came up. I can't really talk about it, but I will say that I had an amazing time. And if and when I'm able to tell you about it, of course I will. But it was great enough that it trumped doing anything in West Hollywood. So for those of you who did go, I heard it was a really good time. I heard LVP was at SUR. A couple of people sent me pictures of them. So, I'm glad you guys all went. Next time I'll meet up with you. I'm really, really sorry about not making it at the very last minute. I told you I would be covering Love Hotel, and so I'm going to bring you up to speed and give you a synopsis of sort. I don't think I should do a blow by blow because we're 4 episodes in, but I think that I could give you a little bit. So let's talk about some recaps. First of all, it's filmed at the Grand Velas Spa in Los Cabos, Mexico. An ocean view suite there will cost you $1,600. And a 2-bedroom with a family room that's almost 2,200 square feet will cost you $3,000. That's a per day price per person, but it is all inclusive. It's a gorgeous resort and I wouldn't mind going there. So who's on Love Hotel? We have Ashley, Darby, and Gizelle Bryant, both from the Real Housewives of Potomac. We have Luann and Ashley, of course. She is from the original RHONY. And then we have Shannon Beador, Real Housewives of Orange County. So the premise is that they're going to find these ladies love by presenting different bachelors to them. And it's kind of like a bachelor in that they have a key instead of a rose. And the girls are in charge of giving the gentleman a key if they want them to continue their journey on the Love Hotel. And if the gentlemen don't receive a key, then they need to leave. So we start off with a couple of, interesting pairings. The first one is Earl and Shannon. And Earl seems like a total mismatch for Shannon. I mean, the dude wears white crocodile shoes that actually have the eyes in them. But he just cracks her up. So at first, Shannon is kind of giving Earl a hard time. I think she thinks he's like a playboy, and she sarcastically asks, about his wife, and he says he was married twice. The first time, and she says, well, how old was she? I bet she was in her 20s. And he says, no, she was a couple of years younger than me. And then the second wife, he tells her died of leukemia 5 years ago. And Shannon immediately has a change in attitude and really apologizes. And, it kind of changes her perception of Earl altogether. Then they show Gizelle talking with Wale, and she has a really bad start, if you ask me. I mean, 2 different times she's racially profiling these black dudes, and she says it herself, and Wale laughs and calls her out on it the second time. But she's having a rough start. And then Luann is just Luann. She's not feeling Jerry, and she immediately lets us and him know. So Gizelle is talking to Jay, but she's just so aloof and so kind of like antiseptic. And then we have Shannon, and she's saying that she's liking Ralph, but then Ralph and Shannon are talking, and Gizelle comes up and approaches him. Shannon gets pretty upset by that. Ashley talks to Nick, and she doesn't seem to be feeling him. And then Wale asks Ashley if he could walk her to her room. And she says yes. And then they get there, and he kind of hems and haws, and he says, okay, good night. And she closes the door and says, he should have kissed me. And as he's walking down the hall, the camera is following him, and he knows that he missed his chance, and he kind of says so out loud, and then turns around and comes back and knocks on the door and tells her he forgot to do something, and then lays a juicy kiss on her to end episode 1. So in episode 2, they do a menage a trois date, which is basically going to be each of the girls with 2 guys. So we have Ashley, Nick, and Jerry. And then we have Luann, Mark, and Ralph, and Wale. And I'll explain why in a minute. Then we have Shannon, Ralph, and Jay. And then Gizelle, Phil, and Ralph. Well, in case you haven't noticed, everybody picked Ralph. And so the rules of the game are that if any more than one person picks any man, then the power switches to the man, and he gets to choose who he wants to go with. So Ralph chooses Gizelle, which is why Luann ended up choosing Wale, and Shannon picked Earl. So they have this Mexican night, and they're out on their dates, and Luann doesn't really like Mark, and so she kind of changes the subject and switches her attention to Wale, and she wants him to impress Ashley, so she encourages him to write a note and go interrupt. And then Earl shares with Shannon a kind of sad story about a stepson that he raised, essentially. And when the marriage ended, he was denied access to that stepson. And I think we've talked about, the injustice of being a step parent and having a genuine connection and love for a child that you've raised as your own and then gets pulled from you. And he tells about how the little boy always wanted his motorcycle, and he had promised it to him, and that the motorcycle to this day is still sitting in his garage. And I think the kid's in his 20s, maybe even 30s. Don't quote me. I forgot that part and I didn't write it down. So now we have Miss Hard to Please Gizelle really being impressed by Phil. Now, is she impressed by Phil? I think she's impressed by Phil's money, but we'll get into that. So we have Ashley, who's really flattered that Wale took the time to send a note. She thought it was sweet. And then Jerry's really starting to annoy Lou. Like, she's just kind of not okay with him anymore. And then we notice that Nick tries to make his move, but he says he's being cock-blocked by the girls. So in the cutest scene of this, in my opinion, episode, Shannon gets the girls matching outfits. Now, if you're a Real Housewives of an Orange County fan, you know that whenever Shannon goes on a vacation, she does this. Shannon is notorious for going over the top, really digging into a theme, and she could be so much fun. So this is no surprise, but in this case, she said she wanted the girls to have their Sex in the City moment, and it was really cute. So then they all come together, and Joel announces that there are going to be more guys coming. But there's a caveat. They each need to pick one man to stay and give them a key, and everybody else needs to leave. So Lou picks Ralph, Shannon picks Earl, Ashley, of course, picks Wale, and then Gizelle picks Jay. Joel announces that there's a wild card, and Gizelle is so happy because she really was struggling. So they all kind of chit-chat amongst themselves and decide that they are going to choose to keep Phil. And they do that for Gizelle. And so as it ends, Joel announces that there are going to be new men and tells the girls that they'll each get one more key. So episode 6 brings us 6 new guys. We have the James Earl Jones sounding guy, and it turns out that he is Gizelle's ex-boyfriend's first cousin. So Gizelle says, "Do I know you?" And he says, "Yes, you do." they agree nothing's going to happen, nothing can happen. And so that's that. And then Ashley has this ring of men around her, and they're all talking astrology. I think they're trying to impress her. Who knows what's going on? Luann is over on the other side talking to Adam, who's Mr. Educated. And then Craig shows up and Luann's a little bit rude to him. I'm starting to see a pattern with Luann. She's very dismissive. And I know somebody who knows her and has said that that is in fact the case, that she's kind of a difficult person to be friends with. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be in a relationship with her. But whatever. Anyway, James and Shannon, they were actually at USC at the same time. So the more and more they talk, the more they're finding that they have in common. And then Luann starts talking about cycles. She says everything goes in 7-year cycles. And then she says, oh, that's interesting because my birthday was 7/17/70. Nobody knows why, but for whatever reason, Luann gets super emotional and storms off. And we come to find that it's because 7/17 is her dad's birthday. So the girls all go to check on Lou, and that's when she tells them, about the fact that it was her dad's birthday and she was just caught off guard. And then they talk, Ashley talks about how she's trying to lean into dating people closer to her own age. So she's 37 and this new guy, Jason, is 36. Joel calls the girls together and he tells the girls they don't have to give anybody a key. Well, that's good news because some of them are just like, why did we even let the other guys go? We should have just hung on to the ones we had. So now it's time to pick. Luann obviously picks Adam. Shannon picks James, her fellow Trojan friend. And then Ashley picks Jason. And then Gizelle decides to keep her key. Joel announces that they're all having a day with all the peoples all together. And then we see the scene with Ashley leading yoga. And then Ashley tells us that she's interested in Ralph. Interesting. Gizelle and Ralph are talking, and Ralph tells Gizelle that he likes to make candles. I'm not sure that's something that is impressive to Gizelle. I don't know. She strikes me as, the kind who wants like the macho man. A candle making gentleman might be too, demure for her. Anyway, Shannon and Jay chat on about Gizelle and Earl. So they're talking about, whether or not this is going to work and how their relationships are going with these other people. And, Shannon seems to be a little bit reluctant, but she says she's having a really nice time and, Earl makes her laugh. So Lou brags about her aristocracy. Of course, she starts to talk about how she's the Countess and she was married to the Count and they used to dine with this person and that person and everybody else. And then James says something about his mom, I believe, was was it Queen Elizabeth's wedding? I don't know. Anyway, James alludes to some degree that he also comes from an aristocratic background. And now all of a sudden, James becomes super interesting to Luann. And then we have Jay and Gizelle. And, Gizelle is talking about how she wants more. She wants more than just a romance. She wants something to knock her socks off. And it's really interesting. We have this scene where Joel comes to Shannon's room to talk to her about what's going on because, he knows that she's really upset and so on and so forth. And it seems like he's trying to console her and he's trying to make her feel better about, all the things that she's going through with Earl the Pearl. And it's weird to me that they left that in, given all of the drama that was going around social media right after the filming. Do you remember how there was some drama and Joel basically went off and said that Shannon was difficult to work with and all these other sorts of things. And then he quickly retracted it. And I can't help but think that it was to kind of rewrite the narrative a little bit and give him a better edit than, social media is giving him these days. So Shannon does tell Joel during the conversation that she just kind of feels that she needs more from Earl. So, even though I thought this was going to go somewhere. And in my heart, I kind of feel that Shannon needs something different than everything she's been going for her whole life. And I thought Earl might have been the answer, but now I don't really think so. I think the alligator shoes may have, sent her over the top. So when they sit down for their dinner under the stars, they show Wale and Ashley having a chat, and then they pan over to Earl and Shannon, and they're kind of chatting, and they're having kind of small talk. And Earl says that he doesn't eat vegetables. Now, look, I'm going to side with Earl on this. Shannon's reaction was a little bit much, but it is shocking that in this day and age, a grown-ass man doesn't eat vegetables. I'm not sure it warranted that big of a reaction. Well, Earl is triggered. He says that behavior reminds him of his ex-wife, the belittling and the kind of embarrassing. So things start to take a turn. And Earl asks, why do you always look surprised? Like you want to slap me? So the dynamic is starting to change. Shannon's body language immediately, she gets triggered. And we all know why. She's been through this kind of shit before, you guys. So now we go, back to Ashley. And Ashley, she says the relationship is just too serious. But Wale tells her, well, I think that you are just trying not to like me. And I kind of feel that way too. I feel like she thinks she should be with him because, the age works and all of that. But she's trying to come up with reasons. Now, to be fair, if she doesn't want children and he does, that's reason enough. So I'm not sure why she has to justify why she doesn't want to be with him. But then again, if she doesn't want to be with him, she should kind of stop leading him on, because she does kind of continue to keep choosing him for things and encouraging him. And don't forget, they did kiss. So there's that. Now, Phil and Shannon. Well, Shannon starts to talk to Phil, and she tells Earl, you should join in on this conversation. While things start to get upsetting. So picture this. Shannon's sitting in between Phil and Earl, and they're just trying to have like dinner conversation. Well, he gets upset because he says like, I don't have anything to contribute to this conversation. And then Phil starts to say, but you could just make small talk and so on and so forth. Well, before you know it, Earl is just pissed off. He asks Shannon why she's being critical. He gets very offended. And then she says, well, what do you mean? And she asks for more details, and he can't remember. So she just kind of rolls her eyes and kind of throws her hands up in the air. Well, what could she do if he can't even remember what she's doing wrong? So Ashley starts to realize throughout the course of their conversation over dinner that maybe her and Wale are in different places. And then they pan back to Earl the Pearl and Shannon, and she says, look, I'm sorry if I offended you. And they have this anticlimactic dessert, and then Azura, the astrologer, shows up. Meanwhile, Earl and Shannon are talking, and Shannon is explaining to Earl that she was triggered by the way he was behaving. And to him, it's just stupid. To her, she can't believe that, it happened, but she also can't believe that he's diminishing her feelings in that very moment, saying that it's stupid. So the whole thing ends really poorly, and she storms off saying it's unfucking believable and calling him a fucking prick. Gizelle and Ralph are talking, and he asked if he should pursue her. He says, I'm kind of intrigued by you, but I don't know if I should pursue you. And she says, yes, you should. So Phil and Gizelle are talking to the astrologer, and she's, reading them. And Gizelle comes to the conclusion that the astrologer is just spot on. Meanwhile, the weirdest scene, I thought, Luann's sitting there next to one guy, and another guy comes up and is giving her a foot rub. And it's just the weirdest thing to me. By this time, the girls are really concerned about Shannon, so they go up to check on her in the room, and she won't answer the door. They're knocking on the door. She's clearly on the other side, but she doesn't want to answer. So when they go to the In the Moments, she is explaining that she's had a really emotional year. And if you guys watch Orange County, then you know that this is the year that Shannon had just gotten her DUI and had just been broken up with by John Jansen and was all over social media and the news. And, she was having a rough time. So she was already having struggles, and to come to Love Hotel and be triggered by behaviors that were similar to what she had experienced, she was really having a rough time dealing with it. And so that's what she tells us. And so the girls are chatting, and it's funny. They all agree Luann should give James to Shannon. And Luann's fine with it because she's no longer into James. What we find out is that this day is the very day, 1-year anniversary of the DUI when Shannon ran into the house in Orange County. And she really is waiting for midnight to memorialize her growth. And she does that by taking a selfie, and then she shows everybody the picture of a year before, right after the accident, and she's got the bloody face, and it's really, really kind of sad, but to be real and to be honest, she is showing growth. And if anyone took accountability for their DUI in the Bravoverse, I think it's Shannon Beador. I kind of like how this series is flowing. They leave you with, a cliffhanger, but not like a crazy cliffhanger. And because it's not, all dropped at once, and we have the excitement of waiting a week to watch, I'm really having fun with this one. I didn't expect it. I don't know if it's the demographic that's just more relatable to me, but then that can't be true because my son told me he was enjoying it too, and clearly he's not in my demographic. Maybe we're just ready for something new, and this is it. I'm actually excited that Bravo is pivoting away from whatever their recipe for success was before and kind of venturing into new areas. Maybe we're going to get some, really cool content that could last and replace what is becoming kind of stale in the Housewife franchise. I hate to say that, being the diehard fan that I am, but you guys, it's kind of true. So for this ending, Ashley is chatting with the boys and getting ready to say goodnight. And then she tells Ralph that she is interested in him. Ralph's look says it all. He's completely perplexed. And he doesn't know how having a relationship with Ashley is going to affect his relationship or himself. Even though this show's been really good for the first 3 episodes, it almost feels like they're still laying the groundwork. And so we kind of have this weird juxtaposition in that they're still laying the groundwork, but time is of the essence because they're not there for a very long time. So episode 4 really brings us a ton of content and things start to move really quickly. So it starts with the boys chatting, and then Ralph tells the boys that Ashley shot her shot last night. Wale was not surprised. And then Luann walks in to talk to Earl about what happened with Shannon. And Earl can't believe how blown out of proportion the tiff got. But Shannon is, really upset. And Luann points out that it was a pretty big blip. Ashley is turned off by Jason because of his throuple situation. And so they have a chat about that. That is not where she is. And even though she's not judging him, she just doesn't want to be associated with anybody who has those tendencies. She said she had that in her marriage. And at this point, she just really wants monogamy in her life so much. So Earl comes to see Shannon. Okay, he goes to her room and he apologizes immediately. And she sits down and indulges him. But he explains to her that he's used to handling conflict with someone he cares about privately. So it made him hypersensitive and he was embarrassed. And then he goes on to say that he was triggered because of his childhood and he doesn't like loud voices. I didn't get that. I didn't understand that as an excuse because nobody was shouting. But who knows? That's what he said, you guys. And Shannon is, perplexed. She felt like they had something good, but this incident is really making her rethink everything, and she's just really disappointed. So the next day, Joel has a meeting with the whole group and asks how things went the previous day. So Shannon says it wasn't a really good day. And then Gizelle confronts Earl right then and there and says, I didn't like what happened last night. And she thought that in her opinion, Earl needed to go, but she didn't give him the key, so she really didn't have a say. And then all the other girls kind of chime in and say, that's a deal breaker, that's a line, and kind of put the guys on notice. Did you guys notice So they supposedly, Shannon and Earl supposedly made up. So as the scene starts, Earl's sitting there with his arm kind of around Shannon. But did you guys notice Shannon's body language was very closed off? She had her legs crossed, her arms crossed, and her body, although somewhat turned, was tilted away from Earl. Meanwhile, he has his arm around her. So I don't know, read the body language, guys. Well, Joel announces that they're going to go on an excursion. And so they all should invite a date. So here's how it breaks down. Luann invites James, the entrepreneur from Santa Monica. Ashley chooses Wale to see if they can get back to a good place. Gizelle invites Phil, the investor who is 63 from Los Angeles. Phil is over the moon ecstatic about the invitation. And then Shannon surprises Earl by inviting Adam, the 54-year-old entrepreneur from Belmont Shores. You'll remember Adam was interested in her from the very beginning, but Shannon is very concerned with the age. And, even though everything has happened and transpired with Earl, she still takes a minute to make sure he's okay. And, Earl says he wants her to be happy, but he could tell he's really upset about it. So they all break and they go on their dates. Let's talk about the dates. Shannon and Adam go on a camel safari. Adam tells Shannon about a new tech startup that he's coming up with in Cameroon. These two, they have a really nice chat and they have a lot in common. They seem to be very at ease. So at lunch, Shannon explains to Adam that she picked up the night before that of everybody at the table, only 3 of the people there took their napkin and placed it on their lap. Now, Shannon is very proper. She is a very proper lady. And that was a big deal. She said that the people who did it was Luann, Adam, and herself, Shannon. So I don't know, but if the little things count like that to you, then they count, right? So Adam, Shannon tells us that, she has a lot more similarities with Adam versus Earl the Pearl, but Adam is taking it slow. And even though he's comfortable and he likes that there's no drama in their relationship, I don't think things are quite where Shannon thinks that they should be. So let's move on to Gizelle and Phil. They go on a UTV date, and it's really cool because Gizelle is kind of looking to see if, there's more to Phil, if he's just one-dimensional or if there's more to him. While Phil is being super flirtatious and, they have a really good time. They're laughing and hooting and hollering and these two have a lot in common, At lunch, Gizelle tells Phil that she was really enjoying his company, and Phil reminds us that he was single for a long time because he chose to focus on raising his now 20-year-old son instead of being in a relationship. And Gizelle tells us that Phil's really fun and he's making her laugh. He's adventurous and he's checking all the boxes. What are beautiful ice queen may be melting. Luann and James go ziplining. Yikes. Luann says she is looking for someone who's honest and has a big PP, meaning a private plane. Well, James says he gets it, but then he goes on to tell a story alluding that he has a big PP, not a private plane either. And tells Luann that, she should find out. But the very endearing James says he needs to be with somebody who has children so that the person will understand how much he loves his. That makes sense to me. I think that at that age, if you're with somebody who's never had children, then you can't possibly understand the bond that a parent has with their child. And it might lead to problems in the relationship because you guys are hoping to spend all your time with one another, but then the other person has their children and wants, that to be a part of their life as well. So I understand where he's coming from with that. Then we have Ashley and Wale. They go on a giant swing. That did not look like a giant swing. That looked like bungee jumping to me. But the two of them seem to love it. So more power to you guys. As the chair is being lifted back up, or as they're being, pulled back up, things start to get a little heated and they have some moments and some kissing. And then at lunch, Ashley and Wale are very handsy. They get very physical and they keep making out. And Ashley says, you know what? I think we just needed this time together to figure things out. And then she points out that she is concerned that Wale is concerned that she is dating other people. And he says, no, he's not, that he just doesn't want to be forgotten. He understands the assignment and why he's here. But Ashley points out nobody else has gotten as close to her physically or emotionally as he has. And then he hands her another sweet note. So good looking out, Luann. I think you taught this man a trick that he'll probably use for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the boys that got left behind are all talking about how they haven't been on a date. And then Ralph points out that it's a marathon and not a sprint. So back at the resort that evening, the girls do their evening recap. And Shannon still thinks Adam is young, but they have a lot in common. Ashley says Wale's kisses gave her flutters in her stomach. Luann thinks Jerry's take charge, and she just loves that. And Gizelle is impressed by all things Phil, including his double R, his Rolls Royce. And then they all head downstairs for a nightcap, and they join the boys. As soon as they get down there, Ralph approaches Ashley and says, can we chat? I want to talk to you about what, that comment last night. And he tells her he's flattered and he didn't even think that he had a shot, but that if there's genuine interest, he would like to pursue it. And then Ashley says, well, don't forget, you're kind of interested in Gizelle, and she's one of my best friends. And then right around that moment, Shannon comes to the conclusion that Earl is just not the right guy for her. They pan back over to Ashley and Ralph, and they're kind of walking away to have a chat privately. And Ralph says he really wants to kiss Ashley, and she kind of chuckles, so he picks her hand up and kisses her hand instead. And then she says she has to go shower and, walks away. Well, she walks away, but she changes her mind. And then she comes back, and she essentially pulls a Wale move. She goes back and explains to him that life is short and the time there is short, and they start to kiss. And they have like a kiss, you guys. She says she definitely felt something, and said that it's the feeling that she had been looking for. So now she really doesn't know what to do. Well, Wale can't believe it. He's like, I can't even believe that she's interested in him and me. I've never, ever, ever in my life been with someone who would date me and a 61-year-old. Well, to each his own, Wale. Don't be judgy-wudgy. So Ashley tells Gizelle immediately that she kissed Ralph. She says it was really good and that time stood still. Gizelle can't even believe it. She says, since we all like Ralph, we should probably try to figure that out. And Ashley tells Gizelle, well, what difference does it make? I know you're into Phil. But Gizelle says nothing and coyly walks away. And then Ashley and Luann are chatting, and they compare Ralph to Harry Dubin. If you watched The Old New York, then you know who Harry Dubin is. If you don't, then he's a guy, or if you didn't, then he's a guy who basically was involved with every single New York person and married a couple of them, to, really, really boil it down. And they both agree, though, that Ralph is a way better version of Harry Dubin. Luann reminds Ashley that Ralph turned her down, so she's like out of the running. And then Ashley confesses to Gizelle that she's really, really into Ralph. And Giselle's not surprised at all. Gizelle says she's never really been physically attracted to Ralph. And so now Ashley's in a pickle because she says she still has feelings for Wale, and she just doesn't really know what to do. Then there's a knock on the door. Perfect timing. Ralph comes in to talk to the girls. He starts off by telling them that they have crashed his system. This guy is completely bewildered, and he explains to Gizelle that he had expressed interest in her, but he doesn't seem to be getting a whole lot back. And then all of a sudden what happened last night happens. And he doesn't regret it, and he thinks there might be able to be something there, but he doesn't know what to do. And then he tells the girls that he did tell Wale, and that Wale said he wasn't surprised. So I guess it's all out in the open. As the show comes to an end, Joel brings everybody together and explains that there will be another elimination, and that tonight is the night for hanging out and observing connections, and that it's the guy's last chance. So immediately Wale pulls Ashley, goes into action, takes a walk. Earl goes over to ask Shannon to take a walk, but Shannon says she was just about to go on a walk with Adam. And Earl walks away really, he goes, "That's weird," as he's walking away. And so as Adam and Shannon start to walk, Adam tells, Shannon, at some point Earl will figure it out. And Shannon says, "I just don't want to hurt his feelings." So Ashley and Wale are having this chat, and he says he's super cool with super complex Ash and her universe. But decorum is called for in this case because she hasn't even taken a shower, changed clothes, or brushed her teeth, and yet here she is swapping spit with Ralph. So the general consensus is that nobody's getting through to Gizelle. And then Luann says that James is all over her, and she's really not mad at it. Gizelle and Phil both agree that they would get married if their partner wanted to, but it was not something that they needed. So that's an interesting take. Like, you don't really need to get married, but do you love the person you're with enough that if they want to get married, you would do it for them? I kind of like that they agree on that. And I'm just a little bit sad that I'm not seeing any real vibes from Giselle's point on this. Phil seems completely smitten. So then at the end of the date, Phil and Gizelle hug, but they don't kiss. And Gizelle is asked why she hasn't kissed Phil yet. And she says, "Because the spirit has not moved me yet." And, there we have it with those two. Now, Adam walks between Shannon and Luann and says the weirdest thing, you guys. He says, "I love this and I love that. And you know what? I love you guys both so much. But if I can put all the things that I love about each of you into one person, you would be perfect." Now, I'm assuming that everybody's pretty sauced by this time. But then Adam goes to see Shannon's room, and then Luann goes to show Jerry hers. And Jerry's beyond excited to be invited back to the room. He just thinks, wow, it's going to be my night. But then Luann does a fashion show of different hats for him, and that's all we get to see. And then, Shannon really wants Adam to kiss her, but he's taking it really slow and he doesn't kiss her. And then she decides that, maybe Adam is taking it a bit too slow. And it's time for her to move on from both Adam and Earl. We see Ashley and Ralph going hard and getting hot and steamy in their makeout session. And then the evening ends. And the next morning we see that Jerry is serenading Luann on the guitar. And they shoot to Ashley in her bikini with Ralph. And they're making out on the beach again. So things are getting very physical between those two as this episode comes to an end. But the most interesting part to me was the Shannon and Earl conversation. So Shannon asked to talk to Earl in her room, and she says she's not okay with where they left everything, and she wants to be able to express her feelings to him. So she sits him down and she tells him she wanted to talk to him about something and that she thought it was important. And she hands him an envelope and says, "What's in this envelope is going to be his parting gift." So we see him opening it. You can see that it's big letters in Sharpie kind of through the paper. He reads something. He explains that he's not usually at a loss for words, but the one word he saw, he says he didn't see this coming. And that's where the episode ends. And we have another to be continued. I'm loving this show. Again, like I said earlier, maybe it's because it's my age demographic. Maybe it's because it's fresh. Maybe it's because it doesn't last a really long time. I don't know what it is about this show that I find very charming, but I would actually like to see this show in different iterations with different Bravo Lebs. I'd love to see this with maybe Lala Kent. I would love to see this with, who else? Let's think about this. Maybe Kyle Richards, Erica Jane. That would be really cool. So I could see this franchise gaining some traction. Yeah, I really can. And of course, I'll keep covering it here on the podcast. I'm really hoping that this one stays good and entertaining and fun. I have not had that same experience with some of the other things I've covered so far on the podcast. And with that being said, I think that I am going to give you a quick home tip. And then we still have Housewives of Atlanta to get you caught up on. And we still have The Valley, episode 6 to get you caught up on. And we've got a bunch of pop culture and Bravo news. So I think we will go ahead and end with this little home tip. And then I'm going to go have some lunch. And then I will come back and do another episode that will cover the Real Housewives of Atlanta. And I will put probably 2 or 3 episodes out over the course of this weekend, and then we'll get us all caught up with our new plan, which will be Tuesdays and Fridays. So I have a home tip for you guys. It's changed my life. My husband came home and said that Bounce dryer sheets contained something, he couldn't remember what it was, that cause inflammation in people that struggle with inflammation, and I am one of those peoples. So it got me to thinking, what could I find as an alternative? And I started to do some research, and I discovered wool dryer balls. Wool dryer balls are balls that are made out of sheep's wool that replace and basically eliminate the need for Bounce or any other sort of dryer sheets. This is not an advertisement. I promise, it's a tip. So why do I love them? Well, so Bounce and all of the other dryer sheets contain like hormone disruptors. They contain phthalates and parabens, and those things mimic and interfere with like hormone production. So you've got that. The other issue is that the dryer sheets contain like fragrances and chemicals, and those with sensitive skin can, be affected by it and also just not use dryer sheets at all because of that. Then you have to deal with all of the static cling. And so that's another benefit. The balls cut down on the static cling. And another benefit is that you don't have to keep rebuying dryer sheets. So you're helping the environment because you're not putting stuff into landfills and all of that good stuff. And it's all good. You get to feel good about yourself in all the ways. And it's cost effective. Why? Because I bought 4 balls for $9.99 on Amazon, and they last for years. So you need about 4 to 6, maybe 8 if you wash really huge loads of laundry. And I think a good tip would be to get 2 sets, maybe one for like dark stuff and then one for lighter stuff. I haven't seen any bleed or anything, but I know that when I buy new Levi's and I wash them, things turn blue, including the dryer sheets. So it just occurred to me that maybe we should do that. Anyway, I really, really love these. They've already saved me a fortune. I know that some of the other benefits are that they are reusable, obviously. They have a faster drying time. And I have noticed that my loads aren't coming out with like wet spots, and they're not as wrinkled. And so then that's going to save us energy because we've got faster drying time. And I'm not having any static cling. And my favorite part is they're all natural. Yay. So that's my home tip. I suggest that you invest the $10 and eliminate dryer sheets from your life. And if you're not using dryer sheets, spend the $10 anyway and take advantage of all the other things that I said are a benefit from this. So that's my home tip. I hope you love it, and I will be back soon. Bye.